welcome to our September meetup of the PowerShell User Group. Today we are talking around PowerShell Universal, especially version 4. First, something about myself. I'm the organizer of the user group. My name is Constantin Hager. I'm doing daily stuff with PowerShell. My Twitter handles are there. The first one is mine, and the second one is the Twitter handle of the user group. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'm also on LinkedIn. Send me an invite, and normally we will then connect normally. So this session will be recorded, so mute your microphone. If you don't want to be in the recording later, you can also shut off your camera if you want. And yeah, if you have some questions for Adam, I will monitor the chat because I think Adam is not monitoring the chat. If you want to unmute or so, you can also, I think, ask a question on the mic. And also, if you want to write something, I will monitor the chat and ask the question then. So the speakers today is Adam Driscoll and myself. Adam Driscoll will talk about, because he's the inventor of PowerShell Universal, he will talk, he will give a short overview what the tool is, and then jump right into the new features of Universal 4, show some stuff that isn't released, I think. So we will look at some pre-release stuff. And after, when he's finished, I will talk about the dev container stuff, and especially talk about how to build a PowerShell Universal dev environment if you want to use dev containers. Give a brief overview of what dev containers are. We will look at how to set this up. And after this, I will show you the working solution. Okay, good. Then I think, Adam, without further ado, you can start now and share your screen. Just do a quick introduction, who you are, and then start. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, my name is Adam Driscoll, and I am the founder of Ironman Software. And PowerShell Universal is the product that I started probably 6 years ago now. It was originally Universal Dashboard. And it's kind of evolved into PowerShell Universal, become more than just a dashboarding tool, and now it's kind of like a full-fledged PowerShell automation environment. So today I'm going to be going over kind of some basics. If you haven't seen PowerShell Universal before, you'll get some basics about kind of what it does, and then from there I'll also be working through some of the new features that we've introduced in version 4 and version 4.1. Do note I am running version 4.2 right now, so this is just kind of a dev build, so I'm going to show off some stuff that is also unreleased, and we may run into bugs, so that should be fun. So what we're looking at right now is the PowerShell Universal admin console. PowerShell Universal itself is a .NET web application with a React to JavaScript front end, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. So it's kind of broken down into 3 main categories of features. We have APIs, automation, and user interfaces. APIs are things like HTTP endpoints that can call PowerShell scripts, as well as event hubs, which I'll be talking about today, to allow you to call PowerShell on connected clients. Underneath the automation section, we have things like scripts and schedules, kind of, you can think of like Task Scheduler or Ansible or something like that, where you can write scripts, enter parameters, schedule those scripts, and then view job history of those scripts. Additionally, we have some things around system events, which are like WMI events, and actual terminals, which I'll talk about today with our latest version of our Visual Studio Code extension. We kind of integrate with some of these features as well. Underneath our user interface section, we actually have kind of what is classically known as dashboards, which have been renamed to apps in PowerShell Universal version 4, primarily because it kind of better describes what the application is. It's not just a dashboard for displaying data. You can actually create full-fledged web applications with PowerShell scripts. So I'm going to kind of go through some examples of that and kind of how it integrates with the rest of the PowerShell Universal ecosystem, as well as PowerShell itself. Additionally, the platform itself has a bunch of like features that kind of cross-cut the entire feature set. So, you can set variables, you can set up like translation files. We have things like rate limiting, we integrate with modules, and I'm going to talk about the new logging features today as well. Additionally, we have lots of security features, so different authentication mechanisms, JavaScript web tokens, role-based access, and that kind of thing. So I won't get too deep into that during this discussion. I'm just going to kind of do a high level of that and kind of focus more on the fun stuff of some of the new and existing features. So to get started, I'm just going to kind of start with some of the basic features. First, I'm just going to lightly touch on endpoints. Endpoints are just HTTP endpoints that you can call from any HTTP client. It doesn't need to be a PowerShell client. It could be a webhook. It could be, curl on Linux, something like that. And effectively what that does is allows you to execute PowerShell over HTTP. So in this example, I just have a very simple script that's accepting a single parameter. I can pass in that parameter in the URL. That's what this little colon name is for. And then it's going to print back out hello name to me. So if I were to actually execute this in the browser, you'll see I'll just get that back. But I could also go to a PowerShell console. Actually, I'm just going to copy and paste this from here. And if I use invoke web request or invoke REST method from here, call that URL, it's going to return that same text back. So you can return objects, you can send objects up, you can upload and download files, security settings are available to you here. Yeah, so it's kind of like a really good way to kind of interface with your PowerShell scripts. And we could also like interface with other parts of PowerShell Universal where you could like start a script in the background. And then you'd actually have some history of the script and output from the script and that kind of thing. Kind of something that's newer in our more recent version of PowerShell Universal. We actually had this in 3, but we've kind of enhanced it in 4, is the ability to create API documentation. So we automatically did that before, and if you actually click this API documentation button, you'll see that my endpoints that I create in PowerShell Universal are going to show up underneath this. What we're seeing here is a Swagger API documentation, and this is a spec called Open API, and Open API allows you to document your APIs. So in here, what we can actually integrate with are things like comment-based help, and you can see it's actually found this parameter because it knows that I have parameters for my endpoint. And not only does it give you this kind of nice little interface that you can play around with, you also have this JSON file that is built in the background. And what this does is allows clients to generate, or it can generate clients based on this JSON. So you can think of generating a C# client or a JavaScript client, something like that. There are projects out there to take this Open API documentation and create the client automatically. So then you have this well-defined client API rather than calling the REST APIs manually.
Or I think you can use also auto REST, I think.
Yep, yeah, you can, right.
The PowerShell module for this.
Yeah, because that will generate PowerShell commandlets, correct?
Yeah.
Yep, yeah. So yeah, you could use auto REST to consume that JSON file and then, and then have PowerShell commandlets built on your APIs. So we have actually added an entire documentation section now where you can create your own endpoint documentation documents and group particular endpoints into different documents and then do role-based access based on that. So like certain users might have access to certain APIs and other users other APIs. So you can get really in the weeds with the documentation now, and you can actually create really robust documentation over your endpoints. So a new feature that we've added in version 4 are event hubs. So similar to endpoints, it allows us to kind of communicate back and forth from other clients to the PowerShell Universal server. The difference being with event hubs is that this is for sending clients events from the server. So in a typical scenario, the HTTP client would connect up to the server, send a request, and then get something back. With an event hub, what you can actually do is send an event from the server to a connected client and then do something. So I have a couple different event hubs. They're mostly just kind of for categorization purposes, they kind of have the same features. It's just that you would send events to a different event hub, and depending on who's connected to what, they would receive that event. So kind of the way this works is we have a WebSocket connection that allows clients to connect to it. And then using our PowerShell module, you can actually receive events outside of the PowerShell Universal server. This could be either locally or remotely. So I'm actually going to connect a couple event hubs up. I have these two, and I'll kind of describe what's going on here in a sec. So I've connected these two event hubs. So pretty much what I'm doing is I'm saying connect to this server. I want to connect to this event hub. And when I receive an event, I want to execute this script block. So it's actually going to be executing that on my local machine. So you could think of this as like an edge machine or like a connected server somewhere. And then you can send events to it from the PowerShell Universal server. So I've connected to each of the event hubs. One of the script blocks is going to receive some data from the server, and it's actually going to start a process. So obviously, this is extremely dangerous, and you probably wouldn't ever want to do something like this because now you can start processes remotely from the server. But you can think of other ways that this could be used, or you could do something like this just with proper validation. The other one is going to return the local process ID back to the Universal server. So from the Universal server side of things, you can call these event hubs anywhere. You can call them in an API. You can call them within a script. But in my example here, I'm actually calling them from an app. So if we go look at the details of this app, I pretty much just have two buttons. And if you've never seen PowerShell Universal dashboard like script before, this is kind of what it looks like. We have lots of commandlets for defining applications, and I'll get into that in a little bit here. But just note that what I'm doing here is sending events based on actions down to this PowerShell process. And it's local in this example, but it could be remote. So the idea being is I'm going to click this button, and I'm going to send an event to my event hub event, and I'm going to specify Notepad as the data. So if you recall, when I connected that event hub, it has a start process call. So it's going to receive that process name, and then it's going to start that process locally. So if I click View App here, it'll load up. I have two buttons. And then if I click Run Something, you'll see that a Notepad has popped up locally. And that's because it used send PSU event, sent it down to the client PowerShell process, which then called start process and opened the process. So we've had a lot of the reason that we implemented this particular feature is that we've had a lot of people ask, how do I run a PowerShell script locally on a computer from the web browser? And it's just not something that standard web applications allow. It's a big security risk and that kind of thing. So this allows you to set it up in a way where you can secure it and specifically run your well-defined scripts and that kind of thing, and allow users to execute stuff locally on their machine by interacting with the website or scripts in PowerShell Universal.
So it's like remoting, right?
Kind of, yeah. So it's like we've established a connection, a WebSocket connection, and you can send remote commands back and forth then from a client. But what's really cool, unlike remoting, is that this goes over HTTP, so standard 443 or port 80. So
nice. Okay.
Yep. So that's kind of one example. And in this example, as you can see, I'm just sending it to the event hub, and that will send it to all connected clients. So it's not sending it to a specific client. It's just broadcasting that to everyone that was connected to the server. What we added in 4.1 was the ability to actually send to a specific client. And this looks a little messy, but what I'm actually doing here is I want to get the event hub process. And then if I have a connected client, I want to get the last one, and then I'm going to send that to a specific connection ID. So I'm going to effectively dig out the connection of this connected client. And then what I can do when I send it to a specific client, I can actually receive data back from the event hub. So I will request something from the client. In this case, I'm going to try to get the process ID, and then I'm going to show that in a little pop-up in my app. So when I click what process, you'll see on the top right here, it's 16296. And that's not the process of the PowerShell Universal server. That's actually the process of this local PowerShell instance. So it actually called this event hub and then returned this value back to PowerShell Universal. So it actually will serialize that as JSON and send it back. So you can actually send objects back and stuff like that. And then it will deserialize it on the PowerShell Universal side. So you can, collect data or, run some job locally on a connected client and then return the result, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the idea with event hubs. And we do support.
Have you done some stress testing? So like generate a really big object and see what's the maximum you can get back. But because I think if you send it over the internet, it could be very problematic if you have a large chunk of data that gets returned to the client or to the server,
There is some set maximum. I don't actually know off the top of my head about the message size that you can send. So we're using a technology. It's technically WebSockets underlying, but on top of it, SignalR. And SignalR has lots of configuration, and one of those is max message size. And I don't actually know what that is off the top of my head, but I would have to imagine, it's a couple hundred kilobytes or something like that. So I think where you start to run into potential like scalability things with this is that every WebSocket connection is an active connection to the PowerShell Universal server. So if you start getting to the thousands of connections of active WebSockets, then you're going to start bogging down your server kind of thing. So that's why we do also support like authentication and stuff, like no connect to this, right? We can disable or enable authentication, and then they need to specify a app token or something like that to connect to the event hub. All right, so that's kind of one of the new features is event hubs, and we're kind of going to see how people like that and go from there, kind of thing. So that was an ask, like how do we run stuff locally, and that's our solution to that. So now I want to talk a little bit about the automation section. We have some standard stuff like, I have a script here, and in this script I have some parameters. In this example, I have a switch parameter, a string parameter, a datetime parameter. I'm just outputting those, and then I'm calling get local user just to like show what it looks like when we return data from a script. If I click run on this and I click enable, click Adam R, now, and execute that, you'll see here's the output from that script, and you can actually see the pipeline output here, and we actually can return complex objects and everything like that. And what's cool is we store this as PS1 CLI XML, so it's effectively what you would get over a remoting channel. So we store that in the database as that XML, and then if you were to return that back to other jobs or get that from the server or something like that, it would rehydrate back to a deserialized object that you could then work with. So kind of what you would expect from a standard like job execution engine. You have like success and failure statuses. You can see the parameters that were passed in, see who ran it. And we also support things like running in alternate environments. So if you wanted to run in Windows PowerShell rather than PowerShell 7, you could do that too. And then like I was talking about, like, you can see the jobs, and you can see I have some failing here. And you can also schedule things. So I have a schedule here that runs once per hour, and it runs my script. I'm pretty sure that's probably failing because I didn't set up any parameters or anything like that. Something new that we have added in version 4.1 is that we've actually spent some time working on our VS Code integration. And I want to talk about that specifically to terminals just because it's kind of a cool feature of the VS Code extension is with the terminal, effectively, you're starting a PowerShell process in the background, and then you're sending commands back and forth, just like you would a regular PowerShell prompt. What we've done is we've actually integrated our VS Code extension with PowerShell Universal, and you can actually view things in PowerShell Universal directly in VS Code. So underneath automation now, we've added terminals. This is new in 4.1, and you can see here's my WinPS terminal, and if I were to actually start this up, you can see it's starting the terminal down here. And this is actually starting a terminal in the PowerShell Universal server. And now I have a prompt locally in VS Code, but this is actually running inside PowerShell Universal. So I can run commands in here. But if I look at like PS version table, you'll see that it's actually running 5.1, and the terminal is actually like terminal WinPS. And if I came back to PowerShell Universal, you'll see that this instance here I gotta refresh it or something. Is connected. So this is the one I just started a few seconds ago. And what's cool about these terminals is like you can store command history and that kind of thing, and it kind of allows you to interact with your PowerShell Universal server remotely. I think it's cool that we finally added it to the VS Code extension, because it's just this one-click thing where now I can start a terminal on my server and either run some commands or like diagnose something that might be going on, or that kind of thing. So in addition to like the terminals inside our VS Code extension, we've also like really spent some time on our app stuff. So you could do this before, but now we've added the ability to edit pages and add pages inside here. And effectively what this does is it opens the file in VS Code, so you get the whole VS Code editing experience. And then when you save it, it persists it back to the PowerShell Universal server. So it allows you to use whatever plugins you have in VS Code and everything like that, and you're not stuck using the PowerShell Universal editor. I think we've made some good improvements to this, but it's still not VS Code. So yeah, so now that's been updated a lot. And the other thing that we've kind of updated, let's see if I can get my other session, is now you can view the sessions that are running inside your apps. And what's cool about this is I am admin and I am connected to this app. And I've had 3 tabs open. So these are my 3 active tabs. I may have closed one or something like that, but my most recent tab here is this one. And I can actually go out and click this button here to connect to that app remotely and then issue commands. So if I look at things like get variable, you'll notice that there's all these things that are like related to PowerShell Universal dashboard /apps, like the debuggers in here, the UD default theme, things like the repository, because I'm actually executing these commands inside my app. It's not running on a local system. And you'll see things like the host is actually the UD host. So what this is really good for is debugging things that are happening in your app. So I've connected to this user session, I'm looking at the state of their session, and I can execute commands against that to see why certain things might not be behaving and that kind of thing. So we're just trying to improve the development experience from VS Code, because yeah, it's just a tool that most people are using for PowerShell now. So that's our big improvement there. So talking about apps, I want to talk a little bit about some new things in apps. Like I said, I kind of showed off the code that I put in here, great buttons and all that kind of stuff. But what we've found is like our documentation is always kind of out of date, and our examples are always like, you got to copy and paste it into your own app, and then you got to try it out and everything. So in version 4, what we added was a live documentation. So if you click this documentation button, it's going to take you over to this app that is specifically built using the app framework, but it's built to demonstrate the app framework. So it has every single control, and you can click on here, and it has examples of every single control, and you can interact with it. Unlike our documentation that is markdown and static, this is actually interactive, and you can, multi-select, for example, and then I can click over to other components, see how those work, and then you can just click this button to copy and paste this code into your apps. And what's kind of cool about all this is actually built all on the get help system. So these examples are actually examples that are in the comment-based help. So we read the modules commands, call get help on each one of those modules, get the examples out, and then we produce this dashboard based on that. So anytime we update those examples, it gets updated in the PowerShell module, and it gets updated in this dashboard. So because of that, we kind of went through and made sure that we had tons of examples for all different components, like radios and ratings and all kinds of stuff. We focused a lot on, the charts and making sure that we had useful examples that you can just copy and paste into your stuff without having to mess around and hope that it works, kind of thing. So yeah, we're always kind of adding new components too. So I'm not totally sure what was new in version 4, but we've added new components since version 3 to here. Yeah, so that's cool, and I think it's been really useful to people to be able to like copy and paste this, see how it works. And what we're using this for as well is automated testing. So because we have all our components and we can easily like navigate to these pages. It allows us to build tests based on our documentation pretty much. You'll notice that in my other app, the other app here is a little different than the one above it. And if I hover over this little eyeball, it says this resource is read-only because it was provided by a module. So one thing that we've added in version 4 was we used to have this templating system that it was a little wonky because it would overwrite files and stuff like that, and it was just really hard to get it right. But what this does is it allows us to add resources to PowerShell Universal by just installing modules. So I got this network utility module by clicking platform modules, and you can hit this little drop down here and go to PowerShell Universal modules. And we actually have an index of modules that are in the PowerShell gallery, and you can actually install them directly in PowerShell Universal here, and it's going to save it locally. And I just installed this network utility module. And what that produced for me was this app. So I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to like implement this. I just clicked that and it added that app to my instance of PowerShell Universal. And if I click view here, you'll see that I have like a network utility app. So now I can go in and go like, I want to see what Google's doing. And okay, it took 28 milliseconds. It just runs test net connection kind of thing. And how that works is we're actually saving the module down into the configuration folder. So PowerShell Universal is all driven by these PS1 files. So here's my dashboard that I created, but I also installed this module, this Universal Apps Network Utility module. And if you look in the file system for this module, you'll see it also has a universal folder similar to the one in the root of the repository. And that actually describes the resources that this module includes. So in this example, it includes this app, this network utilities app, and the definition for that app is all within this PSM1 file. So all I had to do is install that, and then this was automatically added to my PowerShell Universal instance, and yeah, and then I just have access to that inside PowerShell Universal. And if we go out here, we're kind of working on building this out, but we have these modules are all similar to that one. Some of them add components for apps like loader components, like these little spinners, that kind of thing. Some of them add notifications or different apps, calendar components. And if you actually go to the project page, we've actually made all these open source. So we actually have a universal modules project or repository here, and it has everything that's on that page that was produced by us is here. So we're going to continue to do that, just make that all open source. And if you wanted to share something with the community, you don't necessarily need to put it in our repository, but you can use these as an example of how to build something similar to what we're doing here. So for example, here's our Active Directory one. It has like searching users, finding inactive users, resetting passwords, that kind of thing. And it's all built in, and you would just install that module and you'd get that functionality inside PowerShell Universal. So we're just trying to make it like a little more pluggable because obviously there's a lot going on in here and it's a big learning curve, but you know, to be able to like quickly get up and running with a tool that someone built on PowerShell Universal, you can now do that with a couple clicks and have it up and running, sort of thing.
So with the module stuff, can you also version modules then with this? So let's say you have a network utility 0.0.3 then. How will it handle the versioning stuff?
So it will install the next version. Like if you were to install 3, it would install the next version, and it would just it imports the latest sort of thing.
Okay.
So we're just kind of using we're using like automatic module discovery to find this module. So yeah, and really the way these modules work is like it's just a standard PowerShell module. So if this module were to rely on another module and you install this module, it would also save that module just because that's how PowerShell get works. So we're not doing anything special there. It's just going to install any dependent modules and everything like that. So you would actually see that if you were to install like this notifications module, because it requires PS.HTML and PS Teams. So it'll actually install those modules as well when you install it. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you say because I'm working for I think a year now on a bigger dashboard and splitting every page that I built into a PSM in a module. So I can build something like the AZ stuff to pull every module down from a repository or so to have every module installed with this mechanism. Am I right with this?
Yeah, you are. Yep.
Okay.
It would take care of all the dependency handling. Like you could have a module that, like the AZ module, that doesn't actually have contents necessarily. It just has other required modules, right? So, yes, you could do that.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was one big focus of version 4 was making sure that we better supported modules. We have had module support in here. It's just been, I don't know, we didn't expose it throughout the product, but now you can add scripts and APIs and all that kind of stuff through modules really easily. So that was kind of our goal with that, was to better integrate with that, because it should be pluggable, because it's just, code. While we are in,
because with this mechanism that you just introduced, you can say, okay, I have a full working version of Universal with all the settings and so on. That's in the .universal folder in the repository, and just hand it over to someone, and or she can use it without any interference with his or her version. Because I think in the past, who implemented something like the import stuff. So you said, okay, I can build what it's called. I think you called it a universal package or so, and then you can say import, and then you import the package into this, and the whole environment will look like the imported stuff. So you can't use more packages on one environment, only one environment and one package. So this is a huge step forward, I think.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And kind of the way that used to work was it would literally add contents to these files. So if you imported a package or template or whatever it was called into Universal, it would update this file. So that's what we wanted to avoid, was like modules should be read only, and they should be in their own, just like a regular PowerShell module, right? So so that's kind of where we're headed. And I think, as we keep moving forward, we're going to come up with things that people want in terms of modules and features and stuff like that we can build out. And we don't need to put everything imaginable under the sun inside PowerShell Universal itself, and we can make a lot of things open source this way too. So that's kind of where we're headed with that.
And another cool thing is, if I look back at the user interfaces again, that you can't edit this imported stuff. So you have to because if you say, okay, I want to have a user who uses this, you can make use of this functionality that no one can change your working product. So it's also a cool stuff.
Yep. And for example, in that regard, like we actually, this package adds its own role. So network utilities user. If we actually go and look in the roles list, it actually added a network utilities user. So you could add users to that group, but that group's kind of static, and it's used only for this particular application kind of thing. So
nice.
Yeah, and then you would remove this by removing the module effectively, and then it would just get rid of all the resources that it created, and you'd be back to like a clean environment.
Does this also work if your app needs some like OIDC authentication to Azure Active Directory or so, or some other OIDC servers that you can introduce this also with a module, or is there a problem there?
No, you should be able to do that. You know what? I'm looking at this button is like backwards. What you could do in that regard is we have this type to claim value mapping. So here you could say like you get a role from OIDC, which typically from like Azure, it's just the group's GUID.
Yes.
You would select that there, and then you would select that ID, and then that user would automatically get that role. So then they'd have access to the network app.
But you have to set the connection up with the OIDC system.
Yes.
Can this also be, I think you can configure this, but you have to provide some client ID and secret stuff. So you have this, so you have to configure this afterwards. Is that possible then with the module implementation? Or
It
do you
is
still have to, yeah.
It is possible with the modules because the authentication stuff is actually stored in a PS1 file as well.
Mhm.
So if you set that up in here, for example, if I set my OpenID Connect stuff
Yes.
up, put all this in there, if you go look in here, we have this authentication.ps1 now. Like I didn't set this up, but
okay.
You could include that in your module. So,
nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep. Yeah.
Good news. Cool feature.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for building this.
Yeah, no problem. In terms of platform stuff, one other thing I wanted to talk about was logging. So we've added like a pretty robust logging system in version 4. And I think we went from something really simple to something like way too complicated. So we're kind of trying to figure out like, okay, we gave people too many knobs to turn kind of thing. But I'll give you a little rundown and kind of talk about where we're headed and that kind of thing. We have our log messages are kind of split out now into 2 different kinds of scopes is what we call it. We have like user scope and system scope. All our system logs are still written down to the file system, and you can just download them with the system logs download button. But all our user scoped, by default, all our user scoped log messages are stored in the database actually. So it allows you to search them and sort them and filter them. So if you're like calling an API, you can see that I am getting information about that API being called. And if I were to call that API again, I would get another log message in here and it's stored in the database. And that is primarily for discovery rather than before, which you'd have to download the log files. They're always in text. Now we actually have it in the database. You can filter and sort and everything like that. It's kind of been a little difficult for people to understand how to configure this. And I wanted to show off a demonstration of real basic configuration you can do to kind of take this information and maybe put it into a system that's even easier to use. So we didn't want to build like our own, log ingest platform kind of thing. There are tools out there that do that. What we wanted to do is allow you to use those tools with PowerShell Universal. And we use a logging system called Serilog. It's just a logging library in .NET. And it has things called targets. And what we did is we added the ability to configure those targets. So by default, we have a database target and a file target that's defined. And those are just writing out to kind of the standard locations that they wrote to before. And then the database is new, and we're storing that directly in the PowerShell Universal database. What I've done here is I've actually configured a TCP logging target. This isn't standard. I did this as a demo for this. And pretty much what I did is I hit create logging target, and you can select between these different types of logging targets. So file, database, PowerShell will actually execute a PowerShell script, and you'll receive the log event, and then you can do whatever you want with it. Obviously, you want to be a little careful because it's going to be slow doing that. And then we have TCP, UDP, and HTTP. From there, you can kind of filter down. So scope is either user or system. The user scope is anything that you're running. So like your scripts, your APIs, your dashboards, those will end up in the user scope log. System scope stuff is like, HTTP web requests to the actual PowerShell Universal server, or like log configuration problems, or like, that kind of thing, like internal server stuff. From there, you can actually filter it down even further. You can say things like feature would be like an API or an app. So like I only want to receive API logs in this target. And then you can go even more granular to a specific resource. So you could say something like, I only want to receive logs from this app, this specific app. And then it would only send those logs to that location. So what I've actually set up here is a logging target that's sent to TCP. It's going to send pretty much every log message, so verbose, in the user scope. What I have running here is an elk stack. So this has, Logstash, Elasticsearch, and Kibana, a bunch of other stuff running in a Docker container locally. And when you set that up with this Docker elk repo, what you get is a TCP listener that's listening on port 50,000. So PowerShell Universal now is sending all its log messages over to my elk stack. And what I can do is, this is my elk stack running right here. And as you can see, I'm getting log messages from PowerShell Universal. So here was my like hello world test that I ran at the earlier on in this presentation. I think if I actually did that again, you would see it. So I ran that again. You would actually see it pop up in, you can see here, yeah, it just popped up this new log message in my elk stack. So now elk stack has that log, and now I can use all the abilities of this to look through my logs rather than try to rely on whatever we build in PowerShell Universal is never going to be as good as this. So this effectively lets you stream your logs to whatever sim you're using or something like this, and have a lot more flexibility in looking through your logs. And a lot of people want logging for like compliance reasons and stuff like that. And this is a great way to use whatever system you already have set up to consume your PowerShell Universal logs. That's kind of where we were headed with this. I think when this first came out, it was a little rough around the edges, but now we've kind of got to the point where it's a little easier to configure. And now I can demonstrate okay, look at, we can send our logs to this system and process it there rather than having to rely on just the file system or the PowerShell Universal database to do it. So I think for really big enterprise solution or situations, this is going to be important. So.
Yeah, then you can use Splunk and the other solutions to integrate with this then also. Really cool. Really cool.
Exactly. So,
and if you have the database, sorry if I interrupt you. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
If you use the database stuff, you only can use SQL, I think, if you pay in the product.
Right.
Do you then use SQLite for the SQL logging, or so in the free version? What is there?
Yeah, we actually use what's called LightDB.
Okay.
Historically, we've used LightDB, which is a single file database. That was kind of an artifact of the original implementation. We have in 4.1, we just added SQLite support though. So SQLite is just more widely used and more widely supported. So we added SQLite support. If you actually run through the MSI installer now, it's going to default to SQLite as the default, just because of the things I just mentioned. Yep, and it stores all the log messages in SQLite at that point too. So you still have the ability to filter through your logs and stuff like that. It's just reading it from that file rather than a SQL database.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, it still works the same though. Cool. All right. I want to touch on a little bit of kind of where we're headed. So you saw that one of the big pushes we had for 4.0 was to make it easier to install things via modules, make it a little more modular. Obviously, that you can bring down these modules. You have features that are pre-built for you, and you don't have to build them yourself. But we're going to kind of take that a step further, and I'll talk a little bit about why that's the case. But I'll show you a demonstration of kind of what we're going to be doing here. So this is an example of what we're going to be calling a plugin, and it is actually going to be able to effectively generate what you see in the admin console, or very similar to what you see in the admin console, but without having to build the whole UI or anything like that. It's allowing more extensibility in the PowerShell Universal platform. So right now, the way we've been developing PowerShell Universal is each one of these resources effectively has a bunch of moving parts. You have the thing that actually executes the resource, the PowerShell execution engine for your API. But then you also have to implement the configuration system for that API. And then you need to generate the UI that you see for that API kind of thing. So there's a lot of moving parts, and what that leads to is longer development times, more issues that can be cropping up because it's not very generic. So what we're looking at doing in version 5 is we're actually building out a plugin system, and this is kind of the base, the the first implementation of it as it's coming along. So we actually had a customer approach us that they wanted a service catalog. So similar to, I don't know, like it's like, can't think of it right now. I don't know why. ServiceNow, something like that, where you have services, you enter some information, you might have approvals that go through. So there's different steps and different statuses, and then you can view your service requests. So it's kind of similar to our job execution engine, but a little more rigid and a little more defined with like I said, approvals and notifications and stuff. And when we started looking at building that, we're like, why, you know, we shouldn't just do what we continue to do and build more and more and more into PowerShell Universal. This is like kind of different. So we decided that it was time to start looking at making it more flexible and extensible. So not only are we going to be using this to kind of build out new features going forward, we're also going to be exposing this to other users that may want to extend PowerShell Universal. So in this example, what I have is a this services dashboard. So this is my experimental admin dashboard. And this dashboard is empty unless you have a plugin installed. So I have this service catalog plugin installed. And you can see by clicking on these things, it actually goes to the different pages. And I can actually click create new service here, and it takes me to a page where I can actually name the service. And this UI is all auto-generated. So there was no UI work done for this service catalog. It all came from our plugin. And as you can see here, I actually have defined a test service. If we go back to the PowerShell Universal admin console, you'll see that I actually have a services.ps1 file with new PSU service. So that commandlet doesn't exist inside Universal. It's actually part of this plugin. And Universal doesn't really know about this services.ps1 file because it's part of the plugin and it's been auto-generated. So the other thing that's happening here is not only are we generating like the UI and everything like that, we're also generating APIs for you. So if you were to go to, I think, it's API, I type API v2, service catalog service, you'll see there's the actual API that returned the service that was generated. And that's all auto-generated. We didn't have to write that API itself. It's going to be based on metadata about the plugin. So as you can see, we're going to start using this internally so that we can, you know, make sure that we have this very well-defined system for building resources in PowerShell Universal. But so aside from like having the ability to extend not only the configuration system, the UI, and the API, we also had to think about a way to extend the database, because a service request really isn't necessarily a configuration item, it's a data item. You know, like you would make a service request, you'd put it in the database, it would transition state and everything like that. So a service request needs to be stored in the database, and plugins can also extend the database. So what you'll actually see in my instance here is I have a service requests table, and it doesn't have anything in it right now, but I was actually, with the plugin, able to add that table to my existing database and get a new table to store those service requests. So what's really cool about all of this, so it seems like, you know, kind of take you on a whirlwind. The only thing I really had to do to get that in my PowerShell Universal instance was import this universal.service catalog module. So like our modules, it's extensible. You can just kind of bring it in, and then it adds all these things all over PowerShell Universal. Unlike our modules, it's a little more involved because it does things like update the database and stuff like that. So, we're still kind of figuring this out, but it's kind of what we're thinking about going forward, just because it'll allow us to move faster. It'll allow customers to have more decisions about what plugins they want. We're thinking about even like moving out some of the things that we have in here, like for example, like system events. Like very few people have system events that they actually want to use. Like we have a couple customers that are doing this, but having those system event like functionality, any additional code running inside PowerShell Universal, you can think it uses more resources, and it is a vector for like potential, vulnerabilities and stuff like that. So if we can get to this more pluggable system and stuff like that, you can kind of reduce the footprint of PowerShell Universal to be, more lean, more secure, and that kind of thing. So that's kind of why we're, moving towards a more pluggable architecture that I think will be really cool moving forward. So it's very early days, though. I'm not saying this is going to be coming out quick, but we're definitely working on it.
So will this then be a world where you have the fully universal and then the pluggable universal, or are you shifting completely to the pluggable universal?
What we're kind of thinking is, like, imagine you install Universal and you can decide during your installation which plugins you want to enable, sort of thing. So you could still have the full Universal experience. You could just have everything enabled, or you could have something more lean, like all you want is the API server. Because we have a lot of people that like, I don't want the admin console. I only want my dashboards. That kind of thing. So what we would do is we would just not load those plugins at all. And right now, what's happening is everything's loaded, and we have like feature flags hidden all over the place, where it's like, if this feature flag is on, do this, and if this feature flag is on, do that. We're kind of moving away from that, where it's like we don't even load up the stuff then, and yeah, you could just turn it off. And
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, nice. Seems like really useful, and you also are not needing much resources on the system where it's running, and I can see many use cases for container stuff and so on. That's also good.
Yep, exactly. You could have a much more lean container that, exactly. It could just be an API server or something like that. So
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we're still trying to figure it out, and a lot of this stuff is very coupled at the current time, and we want to be real careful as we decouple some of that stuff. That's why right now we're targeting something that's not even part of Universal, right? The service request thing, to kind of build out the concept. Then we'll focus on things that not that many people use, or kind of like side features like system events that don't have a lot of moving parts. Eventually we'll work our way down into more complex things. So
And how do you, can you tell us a little bit about how you implement such a plugin? Is it like a module, or is it I
can show you a little code. So right now, it's mostly C# at the moment, but we're considering making this extensible via PowerShell commandlets kind of thing. We actually are going to be publishing a PowerShell Universal extensibility NuGet package to NuGet, and that's what this is becoming, where we're going to have like all these different classes you can interface with and that kind of thing. The current implementation, though, is effectively this service catalog that we have a new command called register PSU plugin. You create a new plugin, and then you register it with the system. And when it's imported, it does some stuff, And each plugin then has this metadata where it's like, this is a plugin, version description. Here's the features of this plugin. And this is where you start seeing things like the service resource. And this is how the UI is actually generated. So we actually have like whether or not we want to display it in the menu, descriptions and stuff like that, the icon we're going to show, a category. And then you can actually add those fields. So if you remember, I only had a name field. That's because I only defined that name here. So
nice. Okay.
Yeah, so that's it. And then like from here, I have like a resource configuration script, for example, and that's where the service.ps1 comes from. So as you can see, it's like, you got to really know what you're doing. So we're, we want to build up the concept, and then we're going to try to make it easier as we kind of move forward. But so that's kind of where it looks like right now. And from our perspective, we have some of this stuff, like we had these concepts similar to this, but it was spread across like the admin console code and the internal server code. Now we're trying to just put it all in one spot, kind of thing, all in C#, so that we can have the UI generate itself, and rather than having to rely on updating the UI all the time, then updating the backend all the time, that kind of thing. It'll just automatically update. So
yeah, you can see it. It definitely has potential. That's really cool.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. It's a fun experiment either way. So
I'm waiting for a blog post.
Yep. Once it gets a little further along, I think once we have it actually doing something, like right now, I think the only thing that it does is allows you to create this. So, but it was cool when we finally got there, because it was like it made it all the way through, you know.
Yeah, because it seems like a lot of work to generate the whole UI and so on. Especially if you have complex UIs like grids who have render buttons, who render some modals, and inside of the modal there is something else and so on, that could get very difficult, I think.
Yeah, and that's where we have opted to generate this. This is not the admin console. This is actually in the dashboard, and the reason we're doing that is so that we can add that extensibility, where you could actually have like a little snippet of universal dashboard code to create those more complex things that you might want. And you can just load it up in here. Because with the admin console, you can't do that. It's not the same platform, really. I honestly think that was a mistake back in the day when we decided to build this on a different technology, because now they're two disparate things, and now we're trying to move back to having only one, and that's what this would be. So, but I don't think the admin console is going away anytime soon. It's just you know.
Yeah, because so many people rely on this. Yes, yeah.
Yep. So I don't think it's going anywhere. It's just something to think about and see how far we can get with, you know, the auto-generated stuff in here and everything. Because like you said, there's like a lot of things that are like very custom. You'll like run into stuff like, for example, I always think about this with the translations. It has its own like editor UI that is completely different than anything else in the entire product. So we need that kind of flexibility if we're going to be able to support something like this. So yeah.
Can you tell something about so the user interfaces? We see two things: pages and apps. You mentioned something like this, that you want to combine them because you introduced them as different products. So the apps is like the full-fledged stuff, and the pages are the clicky stuff.
Right. So,
is there any plans to combine them very soon? Because it's getting it could get very confusing as we are talking in the last Universal User Group that we had with you.
So originally we were going to drop pages from V4, but then we had enough pushback from other customers that we're like, okay, we're not going to do that. So we left it in there. I think later in the V4 release cycle, you're going to start to see like, oh, this is deprecated or whatever. But what we've been working on is a drag and drop designer for apps. So we don't have two different things. And last time I looked at it, it was broken. Okay, now it's fine. So now you have all the same components that you would have in an app, and this is an app itself. And I can actually like drag these around just like I could with pages, except it's not a different technology. It is the same technology as apps. So now you can see here, it's got all your properties and stuff like that, and you can like change them and, you know, add labels and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to update in the designer here. And if I were to actually like go to the code view, pre-release. All right, I'm actually going to go here. And if we actually go to my page, I have a home page. This is actually generating PowerShell like Universal Dashboard script. So it's using the same stuff as you would author by hand. It's just using this generated layout mechanism. So same components and same everything that you would expect, but in a drag and drop way. So you kind of get the page experience, but we don't have to like support two completely different technologies. The other thing with pages was they were all XML. So it made it easier for us to parse and stuff like that, but it was just like, at the end of the day, it was really weird to have this like one-off thing. Everything else is PowerShell, and then you have this weird XML thing that is pages. So that's why we've been focusing on this. And what's cool is this is all extensible. So if you have components that support the designer, they'll just show up here. And we have some documentation on how to do that and how to make that work. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're headed. So I think what you're going to see moving forward is pages being deprecated. I think what will happen in V5 is pages will be an optional feature. If you have pages, you'll be able to turn it on, but we're not going to like add new features to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm anticipating as the plan. This is using a lot of the exact same like feature or like underlying libraries and stuff like that as pages too. Like same drag and drop stuff even. So it wasn't like a huge lift for us to kind of like, okay, we should implement this in the actual dashboard client side library. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. Nice. Do you have something else to present to say?
Nope. I think that was my demo. I don't think I have anything else that I wanted to talk about in here. Yeah. I mean, we've added little things in V4 that were not in V3, such as like some diagnostic stuff. One big thing was health checks. A lot of times these were hidden in the log, but now we have health checks that run. Checking to make sure the groom job's running, like if you have disk space, what your memory utilization is at, that kind of thing. We've also added a bunch of things to actually inspect the processes started by PowerShell Universal. So some of this was in V3, I believe, but we've expanded it to not only have like the processes, but you can see which run spaces are open, because we've had users have lots of run spaces and they didn't even know that they were there, kind of thing. And like we wanted to make sure that those are exposed. And we also now just added in V4.1 is the ability to see what assemblies are actually loaded into your PowerShell processes. And this is good for when you might have multiple modules loaded in the same thing and one might not work for some reason. You can actually see where the DLLs are being loaded. So we've actually had modules that have the same DLL as something in PowerShell Universal, and it's loading the one from the module and causing a problem in Universal. And to kind of help diagnose that, that's why I've introduced this, so we can kind of quickly come in here and just search for whatever we need to. So
yeah, I had some weird stuff that I had with assemblies with your product, because some background. The Universal module is also available in the PowerShell gallery to download and start PSU server, I think is the commandlet to run a Universal instance. And I demoed it and left it in my documents folder in my profile. And then if the VS Code extension of Universal starts, it will check if there is a new version of the Universal module, and it will load it into program files, for example. And then I had a version conflict, because I had my documents Universal stuff, some old version, and your new one, and we have an assembly conflict.
Right.
I had to check which it was. I had to delete the documents one, and then it works again. Yeah.
Right.
That's some cool stuff on assembly conflicts.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Okay. If you are not having anything to present, or then I will open the floor for questions. Any feedback, questions for Adam while we are here before I start my presentation? Very quiet. None for me. Hey, Phil, by the way. Hey, Phil. None for me. Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? Okay, so everyone is happy.
Cool, thanks.
Then thank you for your presentation. I think then I will take over the stage and share my screen. I hope everything works well then. My PC is not so stressed out, I see. Let's check. Good. Can anyone see my screen? I hope so. Just a quick mic speak.
Yep.
If okay,
I can see it.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Good. So I will talk today about a little introduction to dev containers, and I because we are speaking about PowerShell Universal today, I built a dev container, so a VS Code environment, a dev environment around the PowerShell Universal the PowerShell Universal Docker container. Let's put it like this. So a dev container. What is a dev container? It's basically you can use any Docker container to make it. You can use any Docker container to build it as a dev container. You just need the Docker container, and then you have a fully featured development environment. In this container, you can put anything you want, like for example, compilers, code generators, doc generators, and so on. So you can have a container that's built for especially for your product. And this is an open specification. So I brought up the site for this one. So it's not built. Yeah, I think it's built from Microsoft, but yeah, but you can use it as an open specification. So you don't have to use it with VS Code. You can use it like you want. And here we have the reference implementation and the JSON schema and so on. So you can get really complex with this. I will show a sample JSON for this product then for the container that we are using later. So why should we use a dev container then now? Then a dev container can be used by all developers on the team. So think of you have many teams that one team uses Python, one team uses PowerShell, one team uses C# and so on. So you can, for every project, you can do a dev container stuff and set them up really quickly. So every developer who comes new to your team or so can use this development environment without using or without installing all the tools on their machines and so on. Also, it can also be useful if you have some project on, let's say, GitHub or so that you clone the repo, open it in VS Code. VS Code says, "Oh, cool, you have a dev container. Do you want to open it?" And then you can just pull the container image and start working without needing to install many features and software and have some problem with putting stuff together and so on. Then we have the dev container and the VS Code stuff. So VS Code, we have an extension here that's called Remote Containers. It's part of the Remote Development Extension pack. And if you have a dev container file, we will look at it later. Inside of this, inside of your folder structure that you load, then a little pop-up will show in the right or left of VS Code and says, "Okay, I noticed you have a dev container. Would you like to open the repository with the dev container?" If you say, "Okay, reopen it in container," then VS Code reloads and sets it up. You have this .dev container folder, and in this .dev container folder there is a dev container.json, and you can optionally bring in your own Docker file or use something like Docker Compose to build many containers. So, for example, you say, "I want to have PowerShell Universal licensed." You can say, "Okay, I want to have a Docker Compose file for the Universal container, and I also want to have a SQL Server container running and connect them together." So you can use something like this inside of your devcontainer.json file. And you also have the ability, so I described this. If I press the F1 or, for example, or Control-Shift-P to bring up the command palette, I have the dev container stuff, and I can say add dev container configuration files. And oh no, okay. If I say continue, let's do it. And then I have some pre-built dev containers from Microsoft already. So I can say, okay, I want to have a Python 3 Anaconda environment, or I want to have some Node.js and JavaScript container or so on. So I don't have to do anything to build it myself. I just can use this pre-baked ones. Or if I want to get fancy, I can build my own Docker file and references. In the next step, I can also bring in some tools that the community has done. So something like 1Password, CLI, and so on. And then the dev container will be the dev container process will integrate it into the container and make it available to use. And then it will create this folder structure. So the .dev container folder and the dev container JSON file. Let's escape out of this and let's look at the actual dev container JSON file. It's something like this. So I will make it a bit bigger so that we can read it. Also, you have IntelliSense support inside of this. So you can, because we have a JSON schema, we can make use of that JSON schema and we can say, okay, what other parameters do we have in stock that we are not using at the moment? So I'm giving my dev container name so that I can see it here in the bottom if we are starting the remote session. I tell the dev container which image to use, but there is also, like I mentioned, a parameter for bringing in your Docker file also. So you just reference it inside here and have your Docker file in the same, or your Docker Compose file in the same folder, and then you're good to go. Workspace folder is where is my entry point inside of the container. So if I open the dev container, where should I start? I would like to start from the root folder. And then I have this customization stuff, and this is where it gets really nice. We have this VS Code section, and inside of this VS Code sections, I can say what settings do I want to have inside of the dev container, and especially what extensions do I want to have in this dev container. So I can say, okay, this app token is only for my universal instance, so it's not for everyone to use. So that's no problem if I show it here on screen. Or when I show it here on screen. So you can use any setting that is available from any extension that you use inside of the dev container. You can set it up here. So every time the dev container environment is loading or loads, you have these settings already available to you. And I say, okay, I want the extension, the PowerShell extension, and I want to have the PowerShell Universal extension that we saw from Adam earlier to do a deployment. And this setting, I provide the app token that the universal extension knows how to authenticate to the environment that's running inside of the Docker container. So you can provide there any setting that you want. You can customize your dev container like you want, or your VS Code in this example, like you do with your normal VS Code if you have your local settings. So then I had to play a little bit around with this container because I started the container, and normally I just looked at the Docker file earlier. It has an entry point, so normally the container knows how to start, but I don't know, something happened in the dev container stuff, the universal.server won't start. So I have to create what it's called a post start command. So if the environment is set up correctly, it will run this command. So in my example, it's living under home universal. There is the whole universal folder, and then you have the universal.server, and then it will start the server and it will bring up the environment, so you can have localhost dash 5000 or colon 5000, sorry, to access the stuff. Speaking of ports, we have also a forwarded port array, so you can make ports inside of a dev environment useful. So you can use apps who listens on specific ports on your local machine to make them visible. For example, in the Universal, as you saw, we have a GUI to configure this stuff. So we have to forward this port outside on our machine to make that visible. Then we have something, if someone uses Docker, we can use volumes to persist data, and this can be done with the mount stuff. So this is specifically Docker, Docker language. I said it. So you have the source parameter. You say, okay, I want to have it in this folder, and the target is I wanted to map to root inside of the container. It's a bind, and yeah, I have a cached consistency. So I want to have this folder which lives on my local machine. Wanted to have it available in my container on the /root folder. And then I have some container environment variables. So if you read the documentation, here is the documentation site that Adam provides for his product, PowerShell Universal. You also get the installation Docker here. And inside of this, you also get some useful stuff, and you also get the variables or some variables that you can configure with this, like this time zone stuff, for example, or how the node is named, and so on and so forth. And I made use of this and said, okay, we have some container environment variables. This is my time zone where I live in, and the node name which I want to provision should be the Docker node, for example. So this is the typical dev container file that I need to run a PowerShell Universal dev environment with dev container. And to make use of this, if I have the extension installed, I can click here on the top in the lower left corner on the open a remote window, or I can just press F1 or Control-Shift-P to open the command palette and say dev containers reopen in container. Then my VS Code will reload, and here I get the start dev container show log. And if the demo gods are good with me, then the dev container will load. Yes, perfect. And you see my theme, for example, changes. So because I don't have any extension, or my extension specifically for my theme, that then VS Code will switch back to the standard theme. So if I go, for example, inside of the extension, I have now my local installed extensions, that's 76. And also I have the dev container ESU, because I called it ESU, installed. So you see here, I only have PowerShell and PowerShell Universal inside of the container available. So it's listed here. So you see here I have the Universal extension and the PowerShell extension also available for me. So I can just say, okay, I want Terraform, I want to install it, and see here, and then it should be available. Let's see where it is. If I install this, I think it should be available inside of the container, or it just should I don't know if it's installed locally, but yeah, let's leave it like this. Then if I go to the PowerShell Universal extension, because I provided my API token, this should normally connect automatically. I see here we have a terminal that pops up, and this terminal now imports the module and connects to my server, and hooray, we have a working environment with scripts and jobs, and we have no apps because I only set it up to use scripts. So, and if we look inside of the container, because we started in the root environment, we have here this .PowerShell Universal folder with the repository we just saw in the presentation. And we have this .universal folder, and here we have the scripts PS1. Inside of the scripts PS1, there is this new PSU script, which is called test PS1 with a description, and the path is the test PS1. And the test PS1 is here. It's printing out the PS version table, for example. But you can, because this is a persistent stuff, you can add stuff to it, and after you stop working, or you say, okay, I just want to work locally again. This is a persistent stuff, and you can, if you start it again, you can make use of this. So to show that it actually works, if I go to localhost 5000, we have a PowerShell Universal again, which is not set up for any authentication. I hope I can just type something. No, it's admin, I think it is. Yeah, and here we have the PowerShell Universal extension, or the PowerShell Universal GUI. And we see here, okay, it's running, the node name is Docker node, so also my config variable is also working here. And if we go to automation scripts, we also see the test PS1, and if I ran it, for example, let's use the normal environment, we will see, okay, we are in 7.3.1 because that's, and we are also inside of a Unix system. I'm on Windows, so this is the proof that I'm running inside of a container, not in my Windows system. That, I think, was a short introduction on how to use dev containers and also have a full working PowerShell Universal environment in a very quick way, I think, and it's very intuitive, I think, and you also can persist your stuff that you build inside of this container. Do you have any questions on dev containers or that we should discuss? Or any feedback?
I would say that's really cool. I haven't really used dev containers all that much, but that is pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I used that's also my first project where I have dev containers already used. So here is the pop-up that I told. Just click reopen in container, and then the same process that I showed earlier will happen. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Cool.
And you just need, like I said, if you search for remote development, I think it is development. Yeah, you have here the remote development pack. And inside of this pack, there is not only the WSL extension, but also the dev container stuff, and also the remote SSH and so on. So you just need the dev container stuff for the things that I showed to use this.
Do you know if when you go into the dev container that you can actually load extensions, so you can have it like reload a bunch of VS Code extensions?
Yes, that's what I made use of here in line 14 to 17. I can just.
So it's more than just that. Yeah,
yes.
I was thinking like hey, I can have like a linter built, but it's just contained within the extension itself. And so then when I come out of the extension, I don't have all those the JavaScript linters, and I don't need them unless I'm only using that work.
So you are saying that you can that you use only half of an extension, so like a linter or so, or
yeah, I think some of the other ideas as far as some of the other extensions that you can add in, like the .NET stuff, and I guess maybe I just need to play with it more to wrap my head around my question. But I think it does exactly what you're thinking, what I'm thinking.
So if you're thinking about around C#, yeah, you can use the C# extension, and I don't know all the settings on the top of my head. If you have to configure, especially to work with some linters or so, you have to make use of the settings stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's part of that thing is like, hey, I can only load those extensions when I'm using that dev container, and then when I leave the dev container, then all those extensions are no longer used.
Yes, that's the thing around this one. So you don't need to have the extension locally installed. If you load that dev container, only this extension will be available to your container.
That's the magic. I got it.
Just what if I go back to the dev container, just start the container again. So if I go to extensions here, you have this stuff local installed, and then you have the dev container colon your name of the dev container installed. You see, okay, I have installed Terraform earlier, and now Terraform is available also in my dev container. So
gotcha.
you see, you have here different logos also. This one is the logo for, okay, I have it available only in my dev container. If I go back to my local stuff, I have installed more on the local side, and I have, for example, the ArrowLens installed locally, and this is not available inside of my dev container because it's not loaded.
Yes.
So it's not configured inside of the extensions.
Okay, I got it now. Yeah, it's the stuff that I'm thinking of should not be installed locally, but only in the dev container.
Yes.
And then when I need it, I go into the dev container, and when I don't, then I come out. Got it.
That's why they are so useful. So you can say, okay, I don't want to have all my Node.js stuff or my 17 JavaScript versions or so inside it. I just build a container to make use of this specific use case for my app, and I also say, okay, I want to have this and this and this extension and this and this and this setting, and then it is just dependent to this container. And if you give it to your colleague, then he can work with the same environment as you, for example. So you don't have to tell him, just make this setting and this setting and this setting. A cool project where you can see this is, if I where it is, it's DBA checks, for example. If you're familiar with this, DBA checks is a module that is used for checking your SQL Server environment, and they made use of a dev container. They told us this in the PSConf in Prague this year, how they implemented this. And here you see also we have the dev container folder, and here we have a dev container of JSON with a Docker Compose, for example. So if we just look at this one, we have here the name, we have the workspace folder, we have here the Docker Compose file, and then we have here some VS Code extensions that is used for this project. We have here settings made available. So for example, the typical, so the linter stuff that you were mentioning. So how should PowerShell be code formatted, and so on and so forth. So they build some standards around this. You put it in your dev container file, and everyone works with this standard.
I like it. And it's good to see that there's an example there that you can kind of
definitely
borrow from.
Many GitHub projects now use dev containers, because if you like to contribute to the project, normally it is in the readme.md you have a chapter where you need to have this and this and this and this installed. Now you can say, okay, reopen dev container, and you just run the build ps1 or something like this, and then it's working without any nifty or any struggly install on your side, and you have a fully normal client like you used to. And yeah, if you look at the Docker Compose YAML stuff here, I just told you this. You can have many SQL instances, for example, running, and you can test with this. So it's a fully customizable environment, the dev container stuff. Don't have to build only one container. It's really cool stuff. What they for example did. Yeah,
I like it.
Any other questions, feedback? Okay. Then if there is nothing else, I think we can call it a day. And I wish everyone, for my time zone, it's a nice evening. For Adam, I think it's what is it in your time zone? It's
13,
1 p.m.
30.
or so?
Yeah, 1:30.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Then
yeah. I have a couple more hours of work.
Then everyone, wish you a nice day, and yeah, see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.